In this part of Powerplant, we will discuss the engine ignition system, the start system, and engine indications. Let's begin with the ignition system. Each engine is equipped with two low-energy igniters. The igniters are energized when the fuel control switch is positioned to run. The AC power system provides power for ignition. Controls for the ignition system are located on the overhead panel. They consist of a standby ignition selector, a continuous ignition switch, and an auto ignition selector. The auto ignition selector has two positions, single and both. The both position of the auto ignition selector selects both igniters in each engine. The single position of the auto ignition selector selects the individual igniter. The electronic engine control automatically alternates between igniter 1 and igniter 2 for successive ground starts. It selects both igniters for in-flight starts. Automatic ignition occurs during the engine start cycle until the selected igniter shuts off at 50% N2 RPM. Automatic ignition occurs for all engines when flaps are out of the up position. Automatic ignition occurs for each engine that has nacelle anti-ice on. Pushing the continuous ignition switch on continuously operates the igniter selected by the auto ignition selector. The EICAS Memo message, Continuous Ignition On, is displayed when the continuous ignition switch is on. The EICAS advisory message, Engine Ignition, is displayed if ignition is not provided to all engines when commanded by the continuous ignition switch. Display of the continuous ignition on message is inhibited. The standby ignition selector has three positions: 1, normal, and 2. Rotating the standby ignition selector to 1 or 2 selects the standby power system as the power source for the individual igniter, regardless of auto ignition selector position. The standby power system supplies power continuously to the igniter. The EICAS Memo message, Standby Ignition On, is displayed when the standby ignition selector is rotated to 1 or 2. The normal position of the standby ignition selector selects the AC power system as the power source for the selected igniter. If the AC power system is not powered when the standby ignition selector is in normal, the standby power system supplies power continuously for ignition. During this condition, both igniters are powered.
Question. Answer C is correct.
Automatic ignition occurs for all engines when flaps are out of the up position. Automatic ignition also occurs for each engine that has nacelle anti-ice on.
Question. Answer C is correct.
If the AC power system is not powered when the standby ignition selector is in normal, the standby power system supplies power continuously for ignition and both igniters are powered. Now, let's look at the engine start system. The APU is normally used to start the engines. However, a ground source or an operating engine may also be used. A start valve controls start air to an air-driven starter. Controls for the start system are located on the overhead panel. They consist of 4 start switches and an Autostart switch. Pushing the Autostart switch on arms Autostart. Pushing the switch off selects Manual Start.
During a manual start, the start switch controls the respective start valve. The start switch is spring-loaded to the in position. When the start switch is in, the start valve is closed. With the Autostart switch pushed on, pulling the start switch out arms the start valve for operation. With the Autostart switch pushed off, pulling the start switch out opens the start valve. The start switch is held out by a solenoid. The light in the switch illuminates white when the start valve is open. The EICAS advisory message, engine start valve, is displayed when the start valve position does not agree with the commanded position.
At starter cutout, the start switch solenoid releases the start switch and the switch springs back to the in position. Starter cutout occurs as N2 RPM increases past 50%. The light extinguishes when the start valve closes. The EICAS caution message, starter cutout, is displayed when N2 RPM increases past 50% and the start valve fails to close. Pushing the start switch in closes the start valve.
Question. Answer B is correct.
When the start switch light is illuminated, the start valve is open.
Question. Answer C is correct.
At 50% N2 RPM, the start switch returns to the in position, closing the start valve. Next, let's discuss the engine indications used to monitor engine start. N1 and EGT are displayed on EICAS as part of primary engine indications. N2 is displayed on EICAS as part of secondary engine indications. Normal operating indications for N1, EGT, and N2 are displayed by white digital and vertical indicators. The digital indicators show numerical value, while the vertical indicators move to show relative value. The caution range is displayed as an amber band. When EGT enters the caution range, the indication changes color to amber.
If, during takeoff or go-around, the EGT reaches the caution range, the EGT indications are inhibited from turning amber for 5 minutes after the respective thrust is set.
Maximum operating limits are displayed as red lines. When N1, EGT, or N2 reaches the operating limit, the indication changes color to red. If an N2 RPM reaches the operating limit, all N2 indications are automatically displayed. When the parameter returns to its normal operating range, the indication changes color back to white. The box surrounding the digital indicator remains red. The maximum level and time duration of the exceedance is recorded on the Engine Exceedance EICAS Maintenance page. Pushing the Cancel switch on the EICAS Display Select panel changes the box color to white. Pushing the Recall switch displays the red box.
Question. Answer C is correct.
When the parameter which caused an operating limit exceedance returns to its normal operating range, only the box surrounding the digital indicator remains red.